need to introduce Marten Kaevats now. He's the poster boy of Estonian civic society, so he deserves to be on stage. So you're the disruptor. You love to change things. And I know you've been really active in this civic movement and building the communities from sort of
bottom up.
Bottom up, yes. I was like, oh, what's the opposite of up? And now you're working for the government.
Yeah.
So how does that, it's like, have you lost your edge?
I wouldn't say so, because I've been working for the government for about 2 years now, and I think if you would have taken me 2 years ago, and myself as a person, I would not have imagined that I really would enjoy the work in a government. And I really do. And one of the important things is also that this kind of creative and disruptive mindset is really needed. And this kind of new tech ideas and stuff, and also the mentality and way of doing it, is something that we can do here in Estonia.
Because yesterday the president was saying that, that the public sector is actually the follower. So the big companies will set the standard and then the governments just follow it. So would you disagree?
No. Public sector will always be lagging behind. And that's the main entity thing. But I think we have a possibility here in Estonia to make something different, make it work. And I'm making that happen and also responsible for the whole thing.
Okay. And today you will be talking about mobility. And I remember from a previous conference you saying that by 2030, there will be 90% autonomous cars in
Estonia. Yeah, this is the vision that the government has. So in next 13 years, we are changing the whole landscape here in Estonia. And I think this is a kind of an interesting direction that we are working on.
Okay, but you will be discussing this on the stage now?
Yes, also.
Okay, so the stage is yours.
Thank you. So, I think it is not news to the tech community that there are some new things coming online, such as self-driving cars, Hyperloop, a lot of changes happening in the mobility domain. And Estonia sees itself as a front-runner, also not in only e-governance things, but also bringing this self-driving cars, mobility, the business cases live here. We've been working hard since 2nd of March from this year. Estonia declared that this self-driving thing here is street legal everywhere. So if you are working on that, we can facilitate it. But without any further ado, today we have a really good set of panelists who are from various backgrounds, not only self-driving cars, also Hyperloop, also business model side. And I will start inviting them in. First, Yuki. She comes from the West Coast and is working with open source platforms.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And she will introduce more thoroughly what she does a bit later.
Okay. I'm going to say
then Kumardev. He has a very, very rich background with various stuff, working with the European Union, was just with a phone call with Angela Merkel and so on and so on. So he will also introduce a bit later what she does exactly. And from Unmanned, Brussels.
Thank you.
Then we have Chantal, representing the business model side. From BlaBlaCar. Probably if you've been moving around in Europe, then you maybe have, or maybe not, tried this sharing a car thing.
Thank you.
And then Srikumaar, from Hyperloop. We are also working together quite densely with the Finnish side. The idea is to make the tunnel to Helsinki and to move from this spot to Helsinki in 6 minutes, and working together with Hyperloop on that one. So. as this domain is so varied, it is a kind of a Pandora's box. If you open it up, a lot of questions arise, and there are more questions than answers currently. But today we'll try to discuss few of these answers. We have few of this vision. How can we facilitate it, and also try to look at that from different point of views, because this is not only a technological innovation thing, it's a social thing. And I think one of the difficult obstacles of facilitating this is about user behavior and how the wider audience adapts these changes. And well, without further ado, we start discussing these things. But first, everybody, tell what are you doing, what's your interest in this game, and yes, so.
Great. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. A great congratulations to Anders Birk, who has been organizing this right from this very event to the meticulously detailed Latitude 59 app. It's been incredible. So congrats on that, and thanks, Marten, for having us here. So my name is Sri. I work with HyperloopOne. I work from Amsterdam and as business development specialist. So I hope you guys know what Hyperloop is. Does anyone? Hands raised? Oh, wow, that's fantastic. So you know the speeds that it can go to. For us, it is very important the way how we live and for the transformation of this world in terms of the next transport phase. We used to call that, so far it has been the IT phase, and now it's going to be the transport phase of development, which is going to happen, and we are trying to make that happen.
Chantal.
Great. So thank you so much for having me here. Great pleasure to be with you today and discussing about the future of transportation. So I'm Chantal. I work at BlaBlaCar. I'm originally European, but I spent 5 years working in Asia, mostly for financial services companies. And it's not until I moved to Silicon Valley that I got acquainted with the technology world, fell in love with it, and then now at BlaBlaCar, I'm building new business lines and new product lines for the company. Again, is anyone not knowing what BlaBlaCar is? Two people, so.
I know.
Well, BlaBlaCar is the largest long-distance ride-sharing community. And we provide the opportunity to drivers that are traveling long distance to share the cost of the journey with passengers which are going the same direction. And today the company has about 40 million members spread across 22 countries, and we are growing very fast.
Well, first of all, thank you, Marten, for inviting us, and thank you, Andras. I don't see you in the audience, but I guess you must be somewhere. I just wanted to add to what Sri said. I think Latitude 59 has really become the definitive technology conference in the region, and I think it's much better than Pioneers. Pioneers has deteriorated in value, while Latitude 59 has increased in value. And this is my third year at this conference. I've been a speaker before. I've been in the audience many times. And what is really great about the conference is, as she was mentioning, the level of detail management that is done, especially all the volunteers and all the staff was so nice. So it's great to be back. Now, what is Unmanned Live? We'll talk about that in detail, but the clue is in the name. We are enabling the fourth industrial revolution, a society where you can have unmanned vehicles and both flying and on the ground, basically robots that work together as a fleet and can do tasks that are not necessarily meant to be done by humans. So things like managing forest fires, managing nuclear reactions that melt down, but even delivering you your package at home within 2 hours of it being ordered online on Amazon. Now, I'm not sure it'd work with Amazon, but you get the idea. So we are a software platform that is AI-driven and enables autonomous drones as a fleet to work as an automatic workforce. And we'll get into the details of what that means. The societal implications of that, of course, very interesting, especially when you combine it with the sharing aspect of BlaBlaCar and the high-tech aspect of Hyperloop and the paradigms that are coming out.
Okay, nice to meet you all. I'm Yuki, and even if I don't look like I'm Italian, I was born in Torino, automotive city of Italy, and literally I grew up with Nutella and automotive. Okay, so I am now based in Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, and I'm the co-founder and the COO of OSVehicle. That means open source vehicle. We were very hit by the traditional industry, the traditional way of making vehicles, especially in Torino. From the environmental point of view, as you see here, car graveyards, but also from the social point of view, when Fiat moved out from the country, he destroyed the ecosystem that was in Torino. So we were very thinking, okay, we can do vehicles in a different way. After 100 years of basically the same way of producing vehicles, there is definitely some way that could be new and better. So we focused on, okay, first solving the environmental issues, because we really think that vehicles right now, at the end of their life cycle, they don't need to be piled like this. Okay, and there is a better way to use those components. And then also we decided to lower the barriers to companies that was willing to innovate, but that were like, let's say, with problem in having capital, because the automotive industry is very capital intensive. And so we decided to find a way to lower that. And we started to develop ready-to-use technology, mechanical hardware platforms for electric vehicles, so more sustainable vehicles, that are for everyone. So our customers are companies that are buying our platforms and finalizing vehicles on top of the chassis that we are providing. And they're making very different kind of vehicle on top of it. And then also we just recently, last week, released our new product, a ready-to-use self-driving vehicle, designed and engineered for services, so no for ownership cars, and in white label, because we really see the market of services growing much faster and with much more opportunity for everyone compared to the traditional industry of ownership cars. So I'm going to show you a video about our latest product so you can understand. 1 second. Maybe they have it.
Introducing the future of the automotive industry. A ready-to-use, road-legal vehicle, designed and engineered in Italy. Featuring a platform that is entirely modular, allowing vehicles to adapt to any situation, any location, any need. A truly adaptable vehicle, designed and engineered for services. The modular platform allows for truly future-proof vehicles, ready to easily repair, refurbish, and upgrade any part necessary, with flexibility to choose even up to level 5, complete autonomous driving. A fleet of self-driving, truly white-label vehicles can operate up to 24 hours every day, allowing for maximum efficiency. And because the entire platform is built on a modular architecture, fleets of vehicles can last 10 times longer. Customizable, modular, and upgradable. Designed to last. Designed to evolve.
Okay, this is what we are doing now.
So the stage is set. Everybody probably understands. That there is loads of cards on the table currently with this issue. There is a various ideas and panel here. So the first thing is, what's the vision thing? What does the future look for you? What's the idea? And not only with currently, like, for example, ideas like Hyperloop or this open source car, or what do you think as a human that this future comes?
Yeah, it's a very good question to define the vision first. And I think right now we can clearly see that the future is going towards to be greener, safer, and more efficient. We see examples from a lot of car companies investing in electric tech and self-driving tech. And some of us also likes to go faster, like us. And that's what we plan to do. which enables to transform the way that we live and to give maximum societal benefit. If the societal benefit is strong enough, then there's a high chance that the product that you're developing reaches the mass in a more efficient way. So.
Yeah, and I've seen this video from Hyperloop that you have this modular system where a pod can move and also basically it's a self-driving car.
Right.
So you're also working on that idea.
Absolutely. We believe in connected, autonomous, and on-demand transports, just like drones, and that's going to be the future. Yeah.
So from the very important thing, this is not only about tech, it's about the behavior and the business model side. So what do you, Chantal, think about this future?
So if you look at the next 10 to 15 years, I think that the three major trends that we are going to see appearing are around the electrification of vehicles, around sharing of transportation, and around autonomous vehicles. And although each of these trends is very important on its own and is going to bring tremendous change, is when those three trends will be combined that we will see the complete disruption of the transportation system. It is when, for example, the sharing economy will make much less expensive to own an electric vehicle, and so increase the sales of electric vehicles, and so increase the production of it, which at the end will bring down the price of batteries. But those trends will not change at the same pace everywhere in the world across the globe. I think that at the end of the day, the pace of development of these trends will very much depend on the local environment. And what I mean by local environment is by the demographic, by the wealth of a country or a city, by the level of pollution or congestions, by the regulatory environment. And every city and every country will have different priorities. For example, if you're taking a country such as Indonesia and Jakarta, for example, 20 million people, it's very congested, very polluted. So the country is pushing, and the regulatory environment is pushing to having more sharing economy services so that they can reduce the number of vehicles in circulation, both motorbikes and cars. And I think that the second push will come from electric vehicles in order to reduce the pollution. In that sense, autonomous vehicles probably will come at a later stage because there is not, at this moment, the infrastructure that will allow that to grow. If we are looking at cities such as New York or Paris or London, and you're looking to move from A to B in those metropolitan areas, probably if you want to go at the fastest and cheapest way possible, you will not take your own vehicle, but you will either use public transportation or you will use sharing economy services and taxi hailing services. But the reality is that if you're not living in those metropolitan area and you have the need of moving around, or if you live in a metropolitan area and often travel to other city, it is a completely different scenario. And the reality is that for long-distance transport, and what I mean by long distance is distances between 100 and 800 kilometers, about 80% of transportation is done with the car. And the reason why it's still done with the car, it is because it's still the most affordable and convenient solution to travel. And so if we fast-pace in a world where even autonomous cars will come to life, I think that this trend will not change. People will still own a car to travel long distance because all other transportation modes don't offer the same granularity. So there is not the opportunity of departing from a point and arriving exactly to a point. And that only the car can do. What it will change is the time that you spend in the car. Because if you don't have to drive it, then you're able to enjoy your time by working or doing any other activities. And so the way that you spend your time traveling will change. And that will increase even further, probably, the time spent on traveling and the amount of travel that people will do. And so that's why we play at BlaBlaCar. We are trying to reduce the cost of ownership of a vehicle by allowing people to share journey together and giving access to the largest transportation mode that exists today, the car, to everyone that needs to travel.
One of the issues with this thing is that, like, for example, in Estonia, and I think some other places in the world also counter that, is that the personal car is a kind of a status symbol. How is it working for this BlaBlaCar?
It is a status symbol. In fact, there's been plenty of analysis done by McKinsey and by various banks that say that ownership will not go down because people still enjoy having a car and customize it, having the perfect seating for your children, and having a car which is also always at your disposal in case you need to travel somewhere. So we feel that there is still a sense of ownership of a vehicle, which is important and will remain so in the future. The beautiful thing about the sharing economy is that having access to that vehicle is going to be cheaper because you will be able to share the cost with other people and, for example, offer your vehicle to other people when you don't use it, or share the parking space, etc., etc. But there is a sense of ownership which I think is not going to go down in the near future.
And I'd like to add to that point. I think last year, I was researching as well on the self-driving vehicles, right? Something innovative on mobility. And I was doing a kind of scenario analysis. What happens if the self-driving tech goes full boom, level 5? And what if sharing is not as good as it is, or in the present level? And how do you vary those levels? I found that for most of the European cities, if sharing is not there by the time the self-driving tech has been completely evolved and is in the market, it's going to be a disaster. So sharing is largely underrated for now. That was one of the results of my research that I found. Yeah. So I believe completely in your point. Yeah.
So, Kumardev, you are working with drones and all of those things all combined, and it's kind of a mixed thing. What's your vision?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, very interesting points that you raised. And you've got to look at this thing as a little bit holistically. So there are 3 pillars, like these 3 water bottles on the table, when it comes to transport. Number 1, what type? Is it individual or collective? Individual is your car. And now, if you go to Holland, it's a bicycle, by the way. Yeah. Collective is a green bus or a boat or even an ocean liner. Second, the terrain. Is it ground-based, water-based, air-based? And third, the level of autonomy. So the connectedness is a part of that. How connected you are is basically part of how autonomous the system is. So any type of transport can be defined by these 3 pillars: the type, the terrain, and the level of autonomy, right? If you look ahead, it's clear that when it comes to type, individualism and the idea that you must have your own personalized transport, just like you have your own personalized music and your own personalized choice of dress, is an obvious one that will not change because people don't become different than who they are fundamentally, right? So we might like to share, but we still want our individuality in that part. Second, terrain. Okay, water, unless you're living on an island, or if you have the good fortune of living in Venice and you can take the gondola to work or the water taxis, you're pretty much reliant on terrain-based, on land-based transport today, which is either cars or mass transport, right? But what if that land-based transport reached capacity? Now, it may be hard to imagine in Tallinn and in Estonia where you have so much land available, but come to Brussels and you get the idea straight away. Yeah? Or try to drive from San Francisco to Palo Alto every morning. You'll get the idea straight away. What capacity constraint means. And we've already reached that capacity constraint. And trust me, no municipality or commune is thinking of doubling the road size and doubling the number of vehicles on the road, whether they're individual or shared. So the 2 pillars are already out of action, right? What's left? Degree of autonomy, but also vertical autonomy, in the sense that it is clear that if you cannot drive on the road anymore, can you fly above that road? And if you think this is fantasy, well, in about 2 months, you can catch a flight to Dubai and see it happening, people flying in drones, which will then become a drone-as-a-service taxi. It's built by this Chinese company called Ehang, right? So if you look 5 to 10 years down the line, the vision is very much that you will have individual transport. It will definitely be highly connected, if not fully autonomous, and quite likely it will not be running on land. So drones and the concept of a flying individual transport platform, to me, is where we are heading as a society because we need to. And the technology is not driving it, the technology is responding to that. So that's where my vision lies, is that in the future we will actually use the space above us, which today is completely underutilized. And a lot of activities going on in this area, something called UTM, Unmanned Aerial Services Traffic Management, which is basically being done by NASA, EASA, FAA, and the European Union, is to design droneways that are just a little bit higher than the roadways, and can have drones zip around cities and outside cities and work just like you would see in science fiction. And science fiction, as we know, can become fact quite fast in our age.
So, Yuki, we had an interesting conversation yesterday, but I will throw you the most, I think, difficult question. Yes, what's the vision thing? But with your particular case, I would like to ask about the ideology, the philosophy behind open source, and how this can adapt to this mobility scene as well.
Yeah. We were considered quite crazy when we started to apply open source to automotive, because actually a lot of technology and know-how is a secret, an industrial secret. And we were releasing the most complicated part of the vehicles in open source, available to anyone for free. So this is a very disruptive way, because actually you are enabling others to make innovation. So this is important. I think that in this moment, in a totally connected world and a world that is going fast, it's better to cooperate and reach better solutions for everyone instead of limiting the innovation with all these barriers like the know-how in making vehicles, or you know, the limit in adding new innovative solution in the vehicles itself. So having an open innovation approach, you really help in the end the achievement of better solution. And it's easier to think about this in the software side, because it's easy to upgrade a software, but it's super complicated in upgrading a hardware product like a car. So this is where we focused on, and this is also why we are releasing the blueprints of our hardware vehicles in open source, because in this way all the companies can customize easily according to their needs the vehicle, but still having a starting point that is already working very well as it is, and that can just be improved for a better service or less impactful environmentally vehicle. So we are just enabling and allowing companies to do better job. And so for us it's important the participation of traditional companies, and new players, startups, and entrepreneurs that are really, let's say, adding value to this value chain, directly and actively.
Nice. Yeah. So, as I told earlier, there are more questions in this domain than answers, I think. So, because when I go around, people always ask quite similar questions. Who's responsible? What will happen with that? Then, basically, this is the question. What do you think, what are the main obstacles? Are they technical? Are they legal? Are they mental, philosophical, whatever? What do we need to do to get to this vision thing? So, and I think, let's start with you, because I think this drone thing in terms of regulatory and blah, 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 everything else, is quite difficult thing to bring home.
No, so, yeah, spot on. So what does regulation say? Well, historically, regulation is basically a response, yeah? You react to a situation. So, for example, when there were no WannaCry type of attacks, you didn't have cybersecurity laws, or you didn't have cross-border cybersecurity forces, or a department of cybersecurity with $1 billion budget, which still couldn't stop it, by the way. So, yeah, because Windows was not updated. Okay, right. So, regulation is a response, and it must be that way. Otherwise, we will live in an over-regulated world with regulation for things that are not even at the level where they should be, right? So the question is, how do you map that regulation to be effective and allow for services? So I'll give you a piece of news, and depending on which side of the political spectrum you are, it's good or bad news. So as you might know, last year, the FAA made a big declaration which put a chill on drone services in the US. They said every drone in the country must be registered in this drone database. And of course, more than 1 million drones were registered, because if you were not registered, you could get fined and imprisoned. And unlike in Europe, actually in the US, the law, they enforce it, yeah? So they enforce it regardless of who you are. And whatever the color of your hair, how orange or not, they enforce the law, right? So there's 1 million plus drones registered. On Friday, the federal court said, I'm sorry, the FAA has no business regulating drones because drones are model aircraft. So as of Monday morning, that database was crashed, right? So this is regulation today, is that people are figuring out a response to this. Drones were seen as flying cameras. And of course, if you think of flying cameras, you would react to that saying, hey, I don't want to be filmed when I'm walking. But you are being filmed when you're walking. You're being filmed when you get out of the airport, when you walk down the street, when you get into the hotel. And in some countries like the UK, we have a huge network of cameras filming you. You just don't know about it, or the laws have been done in a way that you're not meant to protest about it, right? So as drones come into the market, you would see people reacting and asking the question, but why do we need this law? For example, in Belgium, there's a law that says a drone must carry a parachute. I'm not kidding, right? So all manufacturers who sell drones legally in Belgium must attach a parachute model so that the thing can actually parachute if there's an issue. Now, I will not get into the physics of drones and why that's a very bad idea, but that's a different story. So I think the regulatory challenge will remain, and it's up to all these innovative companies and us and entrepreneurs to educate the regulators and explain to them that the question of risks versus results is something that needs to be looked at more than in a knee-jerk way. So Estonia has a very proud background of let's say what I would call correct regulation. So for example, now you're an online society in a certain way. You can do almost anything online in Estonia, including opening a bank account and all of that, which you can't do in the UK, by the way, even though we are supposed to be business friendly. And in the US as well, you can't do it online, right? So here the regulation has worked in such a way that is actually encouraging innovation, risk-taking, productivity. And it's quite likely that other countries that will see the value of drones and the economy that will enable will create regulation to support that. Yeah. So today we are in a very nascent stage in terms of drone regulation across the world. We're having all these sorts of very basic things, and they're being turned around and rewritten. But as more and more drone services are deployed, and I can tell you in the next 3 years, a lot of drone services will be deployed. I mean, sitting from where I am and having a view of what is going on, including what we are doing, you are going to see a lot of drones in and around you. From simple things like dropping a phone in your hand, it's going to happen. I will not tell you which brand and which phone, but it's going to happen this year. To actually drones running an entire warehouse, an autonomous drone-based sorting center, right? You're going to see these services appearing, and then the regulation will react to that. So for example, in France, we have the robot tax, which, although it has been badly named, is actually not such a bad idea in a certain way. It plays into the basic income story. And there will be others like that. We'll just have to deal with this as part of the process of creating an industry. How many of you know that when the first Ford cars hit the street in the US, there was a regulation that said that a car could only be driven so long it did not scare any horses? That should tell you something about regulation and innovation.
About that, we are like here in Estonia rather open-minded, and we can actually make stuff happen fast. And as a side point, actually, I don't think that anyone in this room actually knows it, but yesterday Estonian government decided on a new regulatory thing, which basically means Estonia is the first country in the world that doesn't deal with documents. Yeah. We are doing with it only information. It's a big thing, actually. Implementing that takes few years, but this is actually important that the government also has to be dynamic and not talk about documents, for example.
On that point, actually, I would say that the European Union on this aspect has been quite smart, and is dealing with drones in particular, and it'll deal with things like Hyperloop also in the way that this is technology that doesn't need necessarily new regulation. It falls within the space of personal liability, professional liability, public liability, for which there is an insurance market. And that's actually the right approach to take. So if a rock falls on your head, I mean, are you going to start regulating how rocks can fall on your head or something? The same way with drones. If a drone falls on your head, somebody owns that drone and has to obviously take care of that. But you don't need to create a whole new framework around that. And that is the approach that has been taken by the European Union. But the Estonian presidency, which starts, I think, in a few months now?
In July.
In July, right?
In the same room.
In this room, right? Okay, so I'm sure you will be pushing forward more open-minded, innovative thinking in the regulatory decision-making process, and that is welcome. I think there Estonia needs to say, look, it's working for our country, it's made our country put us on the global map, and we should adopt that approach more within the Union in lawmaking.
So hopefully we got this regulatory thing more or less covered. It's complex and there is loads of things. But I would ask Yuki, how's this open source business model thing and what are your obstacles? Because you say making a hardware open source project is difficult. I understand. I have also background in making software open source project. But how does this work for you?
Okay, the business model is, okay, we are doing open source vehicle and we are allowing everyone to eventually produce themselves the vehicle itself. But in the end, it's very complicated because the automotive industry, especially the suppliers, network and manufacturer, they work as they are right now in big volumes. So tier one suppliers are not able to supply small volumes for a startup or a logistic company that needs a certain numbers of vehicles and not huge mass quantity like Volvo or Ford. So this is one limit that the open source enable in a way to have many different kind of vehicles, yes, but all based on key components that are the same. And we are sharing a standard platform that is the same for everyone. So we are able to deal with the bigger quantities in the end. We are aggregating many different projects, all based on the same components, and we can give to everyone better pricing for the electric motor, the battery packs, and all the other mechanical components. So I think that in the end, the open source approach is not that extreme like in software, but it's really a solution that helps because you don't have to change everything or upgrade everything. You can use the standard, the base as it is, and just implement or making some vertical solution, so just changing a little bit. That it's now possible because it's in open source. It was totally impossible because the traditional automakers are making closed solutions. No? So I think that this is an approach that is enabling more than everything a faster innovation in general, but also a vertical solution for very niche needs. So it's, let's say, a different approach, and definitely good for especially specialty vehicles and businesses, services like car sharing, logistic. Probably is not an approach that General Motors can adopt, okay? And they are making ownership vehicles, so that's a totally different interest. For them, it's important to do mass production of certain models, and so that's it. We love what Tesla or General Motors is doing, so that's fine. But imagine all the last mile delivery company that now needs to transition to electric, because a lot of governments are also demanding this in many countries. So having something common and ready to use and that can be easy customizable is totally a new way of doing things together.
Yeah, thank you. So, Chantal, previously mentioned that this ownership thing will bit change, but not so much, because my personal thing that it will change more than you said in the last time. Then one of the, I think, key obstacles or a possible barriers is the mind shift mentality. And with your case of people sharing and not owning, and sharing the cost as well. I think everybody understands the practical reason why to do that. But what do you think that how will this? What's the thing with the mind shift, and will it change? And how can it do it, like for the general society as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I think change takes time, especially when you change your habits, which are core to the way that you're used to live. And we have seen it also at BlaBlaCar. It took some time for the company to actually be successful at the scale as it is today, because we changed the way that people move. And so if you were used to either take your own car or to jump into a train or into a bus, going into another person's car and to share a long distance journey, it's a completely different thing to do. You're actually spending time with people that you have never met before, and you need to trust this person to bring you to your destination. And I think that this is what is amazing about BlaBlaCar, is that the level of trust is just incredibly high. We recently ran a survey around, I think, 11,000 members across quite a few of our markets to ask them how would they rate trust towards another BlaBlaCar member with a full profile. A full profile being information about his little biography, the profile information, and ratings. And the answer was that they had 88% trust, which was just below the level of trust they had towards friends and family, and much above the level of trust they had towards colleagues, which was around 50%, and social media network. So you are actually trusting more a person that you don't know on BlaBlaCar than a person that you see every day in your office location. And so right now, and we are empowering people to travel together, to have trust on each other, and that's just the beginning of a revolution of the sharing economy. And I think that the mentality is shifting to an extent that it's going to become normal to share assets. We are sharing houses, we are sharing cars, we are sharing resources, we are sharing skills. So the society is changing, and that change will apply to the transportation industry as well.
Good. I think so too. Srikumaar, I think your main obstacles are technical because you are inventing something completely different.
Yeah, that's true. So what we try to do is, we have innovations already. Maglev has been there for quite some time. Electric motors has been there for quite some time. We are trying to integrate all those things inside a vacuum environment. And speeds of 1,000 kilometers an hour, well, it's not something different than an airplane, but just that it doesn't go in air. It goes inside a tube. So to some extent, there are a lot of people who say, yes, I really want to go that fast, but we are not really yet certified to go that fast, so we definitely need regulatory approvals who want to set the standards. As you may know, human body, it experiences acceleration, not speed. So 1080 is not a big thing, but the acceleration of reaching from 0 to 1,000 is what really matters. We could do it really super fast, but we are not going to do that. We will do it at the way how the EU regulators want. And for that reason, we are also very interested to work with the European Union regulators, because that gives us proper standards, just like airplanes and trains. And that would be helpful for us and as well as Europe. For Europe, because you would not have another problem like ERTMS, which was OK, I don't want to speak about that. And for us, it is definitely helpful because EU standards are much accepted throughout the world. So it's one of the highest standards. And for that reason, for us, technical regulatory approval is definitely very important. And we also try to realistically foresee what kind of barriers we have next lined up. And one among that is, of course, human acceptance. We know about that, and we are already having proper plans, phase by phase, in terms of steps to deal with how to engage and create awareness among humans to choose such kind of transport.
Great. Well, considering all the things that have been discussed here, let's talk about what's the business in it. How does it work? How does the ecosystem come together? What are the players? And just feel free to start.
Well, ecosystem in such kind of innovative scenarios are very dynamic, and we don't know how it's going to be honest. We think that this is the kind of ecosystem that will exist in about 5 years, and it's going to be completely different from how it will be in probably 10 years. So it's hard to define an ecosystem as a whole. But what I see is integration, acting various companies from various disciplines and governments to act on a single goal, single vision, single solution to have a greener world, safer, faster, cheaper mode of transport.
Anybody has ideas on the business side?
I would like to add that we see from all the requests that we received that there is also a very important business side from some countries in order to not depend anymore on the oil and combustion engine technology only. But this is why they are now investing a lot in renewable and also in mobility that is electric and more sustainable. So in a way, in a, let's say, geopolitical view, countries and corporations are trying to do, let's say, a leapfrog jump and not competing in the combustion engine anymore. So for a lot of a country will be like being free and not again into that games of oil anymore. So will be for a country will be like being independent and serve their own local needs locally, and that's important actually because a lot of let's say the geopolitical equilibrium or dynamics are really related to this. So we see a lot of emerging countries that could be fast, very relevant in the future of mobility, for example.
So Kumardev, you seem to be a guy who is thinking about that side as well.
Yeah, Martin, that is fundamental. And for us, the slight difference to the other actors in the space is that our business model is B2B, and it is definitely more top-down than bottom-up. We're not expecting a large fleet of drones to be adopted by event organizers, but to be adopted by the types of large automotive companies, large logistics companies. So typically today, if I look at the pipeline of clients we're working with, these are all Fortune 50 type of mega corporations. Enterprises that have both the financial and the, let's say, the shoulders to accept this level of innovation and fund it and let it happen, right? And what is key here is this cooperation between governments and to build this ecosystem, because compared to, let's say, something like the internet, which first mushroomed and then governments came in, some would say came in too much, others would say too little. Here, drones and the fourth industrial revolution and autonomy will not happen without the intervention and support of government, especially on standard setting, but also on in enabling. Like, so if you are not ready to accept the fact that airspace and can be shared, just like spectrum can be shared, which was, by the way, 40 years ago when cell phone companies said, share the spectrum, governments and military said, no, spectrum is restricted, it cannot be shared. Today, spectrum is widely available, right? So governments will need to act, because here we're not looking at a shift that is driven by the consumer, but this is a shift that is coming out of the needs, macroeconomic and macro global needs that are forcing a different type of paradigm, right? So for us, the business model in the ecosystem is very much driven by actors who can step in and take a long view, and governments who can step in and support that long view, just like it was in the telecom industry 30 years ago. And then you will have a very rich and thriving ecosystem where, yeah, you will have drones coming in and dropping your badges to you. But don't expect that in Latitude 59 2020.
Actually, I think this is what we're trying to do here in Estonia, to make that happen from the government side as well.
We'll be happy to support you.
Yeah. I think there would not be a person in this room to see this vision happen here. Next year?
Next year? Yeah. Why not? Let's try.
We can do stuff fast.
Okay, let's try it.
Yeah. So, Chantal, what do you think about the ecosystem of this transportation thing?
So in our specific, because I think that in the transportation and mobility sector, I think that there is some things which are very connected and some other which are different business models. In what we do, I think that the ecosystem is completely changing. For example, right now we recently launched a new partnership with Opel and with ALD. We believe that the world is moving to get actually access to car as a service, and we have done a partnership in order to allow our ambassadors, so our most active users, to access cars as a services, and as part of that deal, to incentivize them to share more by giving them monetary incentives to do so. So when you rent a car as a service and you have a contract for a couple of years, you're now able to get a reduction on your monthly installment if you're doing more sharing. So if you're using BlaBlaCar for sharing, which kind of embeds you and put together the sharing economy with the financing of the car. And this, I think, is an evolution of the ecosystem. So I think that all players need to work together in order to make sure that the ecosystem evolves at the same pace. And then obviously the government also plays a role. I think that the government can either accelerate the exchange or block it, depending on what sees best fit, and hopefully it will accelerate the change by being fast and understanding actually these changes in details, because that's what sometimes is the challenges, is that we have so many different things which are revolutionizing the mobility system, and understanding each of them in detail is actually quite complex. But we know that this changing is happening faster than has ever probably happened before, and so regulators need to be in the loop and understanding in details what is going on in order to make the right regulations which are going to transform the ecosystem. And the good thing is that we are transforming the ecosystem in a much greener way, much more efficient and convenient, and so the future really looks brighter, and we have to work all together to make it brighter.
Great. So we have discussed some of the key important topics within the domain. Like I said, there are more questions than answers. But let's hope that this is not a regular phonogric audience, and let's ask the audience as well. We have something like 8 minutes. Anybody have any questions? Hoppla!
Right, I caught it, yes. I have two questions. As you said, there are many questions. The first is, has to do with security, in that if we have very connected vehicles, then it's obviously a very high security risk if someone else is capable of driving that bus or that flying bus through someone's front lawn. And the second question has specifically to do with flying vehicles. I believe it was Elon Musk who's mentioned quite a few times in interviews that the idea of having a poorly maintained flying object a few meters above your head, it's a bit of a bad thing to have. Yes? No? Maybe?
So, good question. I don't know, should I?
I make a point with this cyber security stuff. Actually, a small point. We are here. We have a reputation of being good at it. And actually, with this car thing and IoT as well, actually, we're working on a solution to fix that question. But we see that next year in practice. But
Yeah. So let me start with the cybersecurity thing as a first step. Security will always be an issue regardless of technology or innovation. Yeah? The fact that you're going to have people who will want to breach a limit that has been set by somebody else is fundamental human nature. So you're always going to find new ways of breaching limits and new ways of defending limits. This is an ongoing game. WannaCry is just the latest in a long series. And there are many attacks that are happening that governments know about that are top secret because they affect the heart and the core of business and governments around. So if you look at security as a showstopper, I think we'll all have to go back home and live in our virtual worlds, which will be great for Samsung and some companies doing VR and AR. But for the rest of us, you just have to accept that as a basic risk of living your life, right? Now, poorly maintained flying vehicles, I haven't thought about that one in detail. To me, the most poorly maintained everyday object that poses a direct risk to my health and life is the boiler in my bathroom. Yeah? More boilers explode around the world every day than you are even aware of, and people die. Yeah, in horrible ways. So the fact that if you don't maintain an asset, it will deteriorate and possibly damage something or damage you is obvious. And so we need to have regulatory frameworks to assess that, insurance frameworks to manage the damage. But again, the question is, should we fear damage from something that we are yet to realize? Or should we first realize something, see the benefit and value of that, and then spend time regulating it?
Agree very much. There's another question in the back.
Well, hello. My question is like from infrastructural side, because you mentioned when the self-driving cars, you have time to work with your laptops and be like freely in there. But as I came from Tartu to Tallinn, and actually the road is still like pretty bumpy, and there are places where you just get your laptop and jumps over your head. And the second question about security: if there will be self-driving cars available, will be there any more cars with drivers? Because they would affect or like would be like a risky to people. Because if we saw pictures where there are like people sitting around at the table and they're working their laptops without the seat belts, so will be there like driverless cars with the drivers anymore in the future? And about this infrastructure side also, how fast it comes.
So anybody has ideas?
I think that was related to probably what I said before, and how we're going to enjoy the journey in cars when the cars will be fully autonomous. And I think what I mentioned at the beginning is very important, because not everywhere, not every city and every region of the world will develop all the technology at the same time. And there is a certain infrastructure requirement which will allow certain regions to develop autonomous cars faster. And I think that also we should speak about the level of autonomy. And I think that we are not going to go into fully autonomous vehicles tomorrow. I think that that's the direction that we are taking. But this will happen over time. And so we can see, for example, some lines in the roads which are going to be dedicated to fully autonomous cars. And there the car will be fully autonomous, and maybe other parts of the roads where the driver is going to take the wheel again and be driving manually. So I think it's going to be a shift is going to happen over time, in certain parts of city faster than in other, in certain region of the world faster than the other, but it's not a change that is going to happen overnight. And so we will have to deal with this change, and then cities will adopt, regions will adopt, countries will adopt, and I guess that is quite clear that that's where we're going. We have to see how fast can we get there, and who is going to get there first.
Okay, the time is more or less ending, but we have still a possibility for one question, and I think Üllar is there.
Hello. I want to be more practical. We have on the scene Hyperloop, we have BlaBlaCar. You may not know, but the biggest mobility project in Estonia for next 10 years is Rail Baltica. Have you heard about it? Yes. It's an old-fashioned train which will bring us all to Poland. I call it ourselves BlaBla project. I would like to have a comment from the people from the scene who have the regulatory relations, autonomous cars, hyperloops. Can we change something on this money to be used for those kind of discussions we have here instead of BlaBla, Rail Baltica to Warsaw? Beautiful city, but I don't go there too often.
I think I'll take that question. Thank you for bringing up that question, because it's of high relevance to us as well. And as you rightly mentioned, we know about the Rail Baltica project. So right now with the proposal, what we are proposing for the Estonian government as well is that along with the 3 Baltic countries, let's build a Hyperloop network alongside the Rail Baltica corridor. So let the Rail Baltica corridor exist, because it is very important for the European Union, for the trade, for heavy stuff like iron and coal, let it be there. But to have a HyperloopOne corridor right next to the Rail Baltica corridor would make huge economic sense. That's what we feel, and we have been speaking about this with the European Union and along to the various governments here in the Baltic governments as well. And this has connections as well to the north. A little bit of more connection, an underground tunnel that if you just link it to Helsinki, then it's going to be 6 minutes. I'm not sure how long it takes for now to reach between Tallinn and Helsinki.
Different boats have different times, but basically with 2 hours something.
2 hours? Okay. That really changes, and that is also a proposal which we will be submitting to the Estonian government to competitively carry out a project scoping study to find out what will be its benefits and how important it is. Yeah.
So basically, answer to your question is working on that one. But now the time has ended, and give a big applause to the panelists. And everybody, let's make this thing happen here in Estonia.